Hi, everyone. I'm excited to have as a guest today on the podcast best-selling indie author Steve Scott. Steve has written well over way more than 50 books, I don't even know how many, on topics like how to create good habits and on how writers can start their day successfully. And he's been making a full-time income from selling books, blogging, and of course, the online course Authority Pub Academy for quite a few years now, and has been able to travel, and spend more time with his family and many other things that he's wanted to do as a result. So in this interview, we'll talk about how he has managed to do all of that. And so welcome to the show, Steve. It's so great to chat with you.
Well, thanks for having me on, Lorna.
Awesome. Well, this is going to be so fun just to, just to be able to hear your journey and your story. So why don't we just kind of get into that? If you're okay, we'll just kind of start. I like to just start with asking, would you share your journey and maybe how you decided to be a blogger and then at some point to write and self-publish books?
Okay, sure. I guess it pretty much came in two phases. So I would say back in 2002, 2003, I wanted to start an online business. And I really fumbled around for many years, not really knowing exactly what I was doing until I'd say around 2006, I started to build a couple of small, what are known as affiliate marketing businesses. And that's just basically you have a product, you review it on a website, and if people go and buy, you get small sales commission. So I was doing pretty well with that, but I decided that I wanted to just get into blogging. It seemed just like a natural next evolution of what I was already doing. So instead of just creating random email lists about affiliate marketing products, I would just build a brand. And I called it Steve Scott site, and I wasn't really very original at the time. And to be honest, I made the worst mistake with blogging. I just decided I want to blog about everything, which is like the worst idea ever. So I did that for a couple of years, and I started on that website. I started to really dial in on the idea of what it's like to run an internet-based business. It's something I felt I did fairly well for a couple of years, and I had a lot to share. So I blogged for a good couple of years up until 2012. And to be honest, I was writing almost every single day. I was doing pretty well, but the blog itself really wasn't making any money. And here I had this kind of side affiliate marketing business that's doing well. But the thing I was spending most of the time on my blog, I was making almost next to nothing on the income. And it was a bit frustrating. So around, I think it was February 2012, I heard about self-publishing. And there's a couple blogger friends I had that decided to take some of their old blog content and throw it up on Amazon. That's the way they described it, throw it up on Amazon. So without any sort of real strategy behind it, I took a couple of old blog posts, I slapped a Fiverr cover, these are like two things I tell people not to do, but that's just what I did at the time. And I threw it up on Amazon, and the first book just really didn't go anywhere, and I kind of went back to what I was already doing. And I decided to try self-publishing again in July of that same year, July 2012. But this time I decided to take a little bit of time to investigate the sales tools that Amazon offers, specifically the KDP Select program, like the 5 free days that you get. I don't really use that anymore, but you give away your book for 5 days, and after you give it away, it would see a bump in sales rank.
Okay.
So I did that with the first book, and the first book started to actually sell. It sold a couple copies a day. And I did the math, and it was like, $10 to $15 a day it started earning. And it wasn't a lot of money, but I'm like, you know what? I'm busting my butt doing all this stuff on my blog. What if I just took kind of the same content, decided to really tightly focus in on one topic per kind of what I called mini books, these books that were around 10 to 20,000 words, and just put that on Amazon and see what happens. And almost immediately when I just decided to kind of double down and focus on self-publishing, the book started taking off. And it did take a lot of work. I was spending 3-4 hours a day on my books, but I would say by the time early 2013 hit, I started to see some significant income, and I just decided to completely abandon the blog and just focus in on self-publishing. And it's been a very fun and interesting ride ever since then.
That's a great story. Yeah, that would have been a real sort of highlighted moment when you decide to take what you've put on your blog and put it into books. A whole new revenue stream.
Yeah, it really was. And it's just one of those things like it just feels right. And I remember I was actually traveling with my wife across the United States. We took actually at the time she was my girlfriend, but we took a 7-week trip across the United States. I'm sitting there thinking about the self-publishing thing. I'm like, you know what? I'm enjoying all this stuff. Like, I want to get back in September and just start really working on these books. And it's like the worst thing ever because I'm supposed to be having fun, and here I am sitting in my head. I'm like, all right, I want to work on this stuff because I feel like this is going to really take off. And I was very fortunate enough that it actually did.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. So you made that decision, and then, you have written, wow, there's so many books of yours on Amazon. It's created a substantial income for you in preparation for, our talk. I found your monthly earnings on selfpublishingquestions.com from, I think, 2012, 2015 or something like that. Would you share the inspiration behind your decision to write and self-publish, and then also to share your income, because that's a more, what would you say, bold decision?
Yeah. Sorry. The first question, as far as
Yeah, well, to write and self-publish. I guess you kind of talked about that already. To write and self-publish Kindle books. What made you choose Kindle? Because that's not the only sort of digital retailer in town.
Oh, okay, exactly. I think what it was is just at the time it's just kind of just not knowing what the market was at, just what the options were. Self-publishing, I really Amazon.
Yeah.
And I've gotten into it, and I actually have gone the route of the wide distribution, so putting up to draft to digital, direct to Apple, that sort of stuff. I just found that the income was a lot better by focusing in on Amazon, and
Okay.
I feel also I'm in a fairly good position now where I do know a couple people from Amazon, so I tend to get a few daily deals, which are like pretty significant. If you get your book featured by Amazon, that leads to a lot of sales. So I put all my eggs in my basket, knowing that basket could go away. So there's a lot of strategies I have, almost like an if-then type of statement in my head. All right, if something happens to all my books, what am I going to do? So I do have those kind of contingency plans, but it works for me going exclusive with Amazon, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everyone. It just happens to work for me. As far as the income reports, I actually kind of got away from that, but I was really inspired by Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income, and he started income reports from when he first, pretty much his first dollar he made online,
Right.
all the way to now, and his numbers are just eye-popping. I just decided to not do them necessarily anymore, just because it just felt weird. When I met a lot of people in person that were self-publishers, it just felt awkward knowing how much I made every month. So I just decided to kind of stop talking about it. But
Yeah.
it's definitely a full-time income now.
I mean, that's it's really inspiring. I just have to say, for others who are like myself, who are like kind of on the indie author journey and trying to write more books, and even the topics of your books, I just have to say that they're really inspiring and super helpful. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah, it's awesome. I have actually read a few of your habit books, which have really helped me. And so I noticed that your habit books on Amazon really took off between 2012 and 2013. And I'm sure they've continued to do well. So what was the pivot or decision that really helped turn the corner for you for greater productivity and income in your business?
Sure. I decided to kind of focus in on specifically the habits market, just because I got to a point, because originally I was writing about internet business stuff, so how to build a blog, how to get more traffic to your blog. And after a while, I just kind of ran out of things to talk about. There's really only so many things you need to do to run an internet-based business. You don't really need to do 100 things. You need to do just 3 or 4 things really well. So I decided I wanted to continue self-publishing, just I needed to change my topic. And I did this is actually stuff I talked about in my books, but I did the whole, all right, what do you know? What are you good at? I just made a giant list. I looked at running. I looked at, I do enjoy traveling, but I really just don't travel now, especially now because I have a son who's 18 months old. So it's not like we're really going out and living a jet set lifestyle at this point. So everything I wrote down, and I kept on coming back to, well, how did I get to this point? How did I become fairly good at a few things? And what I realized is I'm pretty good at forming habits. I'm pretty good at, all right, I need to build this into my life. Let me figure out a system. Let me figure out how to do this on a daily basis. So I'm like, I wonder if there's a market for habits. So I looked online on Amazon, and that's actually, again, that's something I kind of recommend. Just look to see what's out there. And there's a book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And I think that was, at the time, that's number 2 or number 3 on all of the business and investing category. And looked at and found a couple other books that are related to habits. I'm like, you know what, there's a market out there. People are interested in learning how to build habits. And I found a bunch of other books that were in a similar vein. So I'm like, what if I just kind of talk about different aspects of habit development, like morning routines, productivity, that like the things you mentioned before. What if instead of just trying to have one massive book about habits, I just broke this down into kind of bite-sized type of books. And the way I try to describe it is my books are in the middle ground between a long blog post and a long book. So it's really in that sweet spot of 15,000, 20,000, and now I'm kind of moved up into the upwards of 35,000 words. But it's definitely not an absolute full-length book, but it's not a short blog, or it's not a long blog post.
So 20,000-ish words. I guess that would be, quicker to write. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the benefit of being a nonfiction writer is you could get these books out a little bit quicker than you could as a fiction writer. And I know it really depends on the genre. Like, I know you're a romance writer, so from what I understand, it's around 50 to 60,000 words. It's a minimum for a romance book, and fantasy writers are upwards of 100,000 words, and that's almost writing 3 or 4 books for me. And fantasy books tend to be trilogies, so that's a lot of writing just to invest in one series. So it really depends on your market. I just find that nonfiction works because people tend to want quick, instant results. They also want a quick read. They want something they can implement right away. They don't necessarily want to read 100,000 words to solve a problem.
Right. That totally makes sense. Just kind of on this topic, because it just dawned on me. So is it better to I guess write, if you're doing like nonfiction, like 20,000, 25,000 word-ish books, is it better to have in your mind, okay, so I'm going to make a series out of this topic? Would you say is that helpful?
Yes, for nonfiction, I don't know. I really haven't found any rhyme or reason, and this is sad to say because I've read a lot of books, any rhyme or reason of why some particular books take off and why certain books don't. I would say if you really do have a series in mind, something that absolutely works as a series, then I would say it would make sense to do so. The best example would be writing. So you could, and I've actually come out with a couple books on this, but I think people like Monica Leonel did a really good job of really having a branded series about writing, and I think Joanna Penn as well, where it's, all right, here's how to write your book, here's how to market your book, here's how to do an audio, do narration for a book. So that type of content definitely lends itself to a series. But I would say if you're picking a topic and it makes sense to have a bunch of shorter books, absolutely do it. But don't just do it just because you want to create a series. I think that makes sense, right?
Yeah, that's really helpful. But I guess that it only would make sense if it's a make sense type of series.
And I would say fiction, absolutely. From the people that seem to do extremely well in fiction, it's a series all the way, and just you get that reader that likes the first and second book, and then they'll go out and buy your 7th and 8th book.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. I'm still on that track. I haven't arrived where I want to be yet, but yes. Continuing with productivity and habits, would you share your process on how you structure your writing time daily or weekly to get your writing done in the schedule that you've decided for yourself?
Sure. Now I'm going to first describe something, but this is not, you don't necessarily need to do this. It's just kind of the way I am at this point. But I'm kind of working on, technically, air quote, working on 3 books at the same time.
Wow.
So there's the book I'm thinking about writing next. So I'm not actually writing, but it's more of a kind of idea germination where it's just in my head. All right, here's what I kind of want to talk about. It's a little woo-woo, but it's almost like, all right, I know I'm writing about this, so I tend to read a lot. I tend to listen to a lot of podcasts. So I'm just opening my mind, trying to be receptive to ideas that I want to put in that book. And so that's kind of the idea of what I'm developing is the first book. The second book is the one I'm actually technically writing. So that one is outlined, and I'm working on the various drafts. And then there's the book that's in post-production. So pretty much as soon as I'm finished with the book, like I send it off to my editors, I'm opening up another document and I'm working on the next one. So it's really in a kind of production line type of fashion. Now, I don't necessarily say you have to do that, the listener, but it seems to work for me where I'm trying to write every single day and actually maintain that habit. So to break down the process of writing a book, I try to, like I mentioned before, I try to do a brain dump where I'm putting ideas in Evernote on a piece of paper in my journal, just any place where I can write something down. I'm usually writing it down, and that's just what I would like to write about. And then from there, I just brain dump everything down onto a piece of paper. I just literally write it down long form with with pen, not with typing it out. And then I take a stack of index cards and I just kind of go through that list and just start putting it into a different bucket. So like it's kind of hard to describe, but once you actually get the ideas you put on index cards, you eventually, after kind of working through what you want to write, you start to come up with maybe around 6 to 10 chapters. And then with those index cards, I try to actually physically divide them up into chapters. And the reason I mentioned index cards is because whenever I have an idea, I can shuffle them around and it just helps you create a logical flow. And I know there are programs like Scrivener that can help you do this. I just kind of like the old school version of just physically writing all the stuff down. And then from there, once I have a stack of index cards, I put that in an outline and I just run through the drafts. And when it comes to the actual habit itself, I try to do first thing in the morning a minimum of 30 minutes. And I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later on about the power of just kind of creating small goals. But my goal every day is just to write for 30 minutes first thing in the morning. And just since I know that that's kind of a low barrier to resistance, I can generally do that. I would say out of every month, I'll write for about 28 days out of every month. So I might miss a day or two, but generally speaking, I will write almost on a consistent basis.
That's actually a great idea. I know it works for fiction. I guess I'd never thought of it for nonfiction. Doing the index cards because it helps to, like Act 1, Act 2, and then you have sort of the two different separate parts, and then Act 3, and you put them on the index cards. And I don't know, I find that helpful, but I guess I hadn't thought of that for nonfiction. But that makes sense.
Yeah, I would think with any longer piece of writing, you want to know what you're going to talk about before you actually do it. And it's I think everyone who's ever written before, writer's block is a real thing. That if you're stuck on what to say next, it can be really just a brutal experience trying to just crank out the words. But if you have almost a prompt written right below, so you're going through your document you're writing, and you see like the next couple bullet points that's right below what you're writing, like, okay, that's what I have to talk about next. And a lot of times you might just go off page, but just you have some sort of system there put in place that kind of helps guide you along of what you're supposed to be doing with that particular book.
Your book called The Miracle Morning for Writers, with Hal Elrod and Honoré Corder. I found that book really helpful. This kind of continues that thought of habits and creating, morning routines, which you mentioned. I just think this will be really helpful for writers listening on how to start their day, so that they will be focused and I guess with more of a successful author mindset. So would you talk about the life, I think in the book it's called Life Savers, like an acronym, Savers, the daily morning practices that can help writers start their day right and then to level up their day?
Sure. The Savers technique is actually something that Hal came up with in his original book, The Miracle Morning.
Oh.
And so like he actually came up with the acronym Savers. It's SAVERS, and each of the letters does stand for something. So the S is for silence, so that's just a meditation practice. Actually, let me take a step back. The whole Savers technique he recommends to do about 60 minutes a day. I've gone a little bit away from some of these techniques myself, whereas I don't really do that many affirmations or visualization, and I tend to like to exercise and read in the afternoon, not first thing in the morning. But if you're having trouble getting a morning routine, I would highly recommend doing this routine until you're comfortable kind of switching it up. But anyway, so I wanted to kind of preface that a little bit. So the first S is silence, so it's just a meditation practice. The next one's affirmations. You're actually reciting certain statements, and if you're wanting to really level up your writing, you should try to look at affirmations that are more skewed towards writers. A visualization, that's just a simple, just a mind movie that you want to create. You can picture yourself writing books that people absolutely love and rave reviews and all that. Exercise, Hal recommends a simple series of exercises. I'm a runner, I'm a walker. I tend to like 30 plus minutes of exercise, so that's where I disagree slightly with Hal. But I think his point was you want to get some sort of movement first thing in the morning, and there are apps like the 7-minute workout where you can just actually run through a quick workout to get your heart pumping and flowing, and then start the rest of your day. And then the R is reading, so obviously you want to spend 10 minutes of time on nonfiction reading, and scribing is journaling, just writing down your thoughts. So it's let me just say that again. So S is for silence, A is for affirmations, V is for visualization, E is for exercise, R is for reading, and S is for scribing.
I found it after when I read that book. I found it really helpful, and I started that routine too. I guess I don't do it for 60 minutes. I probably do it more like 40 minutes, but still, yeah, I found it really helpful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, it just clears my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, Hal did say like he is the 60 minutes isn't an absolute written in stone. If you only have time for 30, you can do it. If you only have time for like 1 minute each, still do it. And I think his point is you want to create the muscle memory. You want to create the habit of actually doing it, not necessarily follow some regimented time length. So 40 minutes is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just really been for me, eye-opening on how that's been helpful. So you went through the acronym savers. A couple of those are like affirmations and creative visualization. Why would that be important for writers, or maybe especially new writers? And how would that help writers to overcome self-limiting habits like procrastination, which I know I'm very good at?
Yeah, I think we all are. I would say writers, we tend to be sensitive. We tend to be introspective. Not being able to write one day is like a crisis situation. Getting that 1-star review is like the worst thing in the world. It can be a very brutal kind of business. It's the opinions of others really weigh in on your writing. And if you read something that's negative online, and then 5 minutes later you're expected to sit down and crank out 30 words, it can really mess with your head. So I do think it's important to kind of remind yourself of like the value that you're providing in your world. And I kind of jotted down a couple of affirmations before we got on this call, but affirmations like I dedicate time each day to creating content that will both educate and entertain my readers. An affirmation like rejection and negative reviews are a normal part of the publishing process. I will do my best to learn from constructive critiques, but I'll never let the haters bring me down. Stuff like that. So you will, and actually let me just do one more. I commit to writing a minimum of blank words Monday through Friday between blank AM/PM and blank AM PM, no matter what. So the idea is I'm going to sit down, get my butt in a chair, and work at a certain time. And I guess the point is we tend to really beat ourselves up as writers. So it's almost like you need to battle against that on a daily basis. And I'll admit I'm not perfect with this. Sometimes I'll read something that really stings and it kind of messes with my head. But if you build a practice into your day where you kind of remind yourself that you are providing value, and if people are reading your books and you're providing value, like people are enjoying what you're putting out into the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And it gets into our head. If we're saying these affirmations out loud, it's like eventually it really sinks in. It's not just us, speaking the words. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's almost like you're going to the gym. You're doing the reps on a weight machine. You're constantly reinforcing yourself that you are providing good stuff into the world.
Yeah.
Or putting good stuff in the world.
I'm one of those writers, and I think there's probably quite a few listening where, sometimes, just like you were saying, self-limiting beliefs like I'm not a good enough writer pop into our head. And this is where the affirmations would really come in handy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say just besides affirmations, you have to start somewhere. And the best way I've learned by getting better at writing is just simply writing, shipping, getting it, putting it out there, taking your lumps a bit and just learning from each book that you put out there and try to make the next one a little bit better.
Yeah. What are some ways that writers can effectively build writing into their daily routine? So in your book, you did talk about the powerful concept of building mini habits. Would you talk about how the idea of setting goals that are easy to complete on a consistent basis can help lessen overwhelm for writers?
Sure. So, and this is actually something that I went through at first, kind of struggled with. I felt like a day was an accomplished writing day unless I wrote at least 1,000 or 2,000 words. And what generally happened, and I'm sure this happens to everyone out there, is when you set a pretty much a really large goal, it can almost be self-defeating. So let's just say you create the goal of I'm going to write 2,000 words each day, and maybe you're fine Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but just something happens at work on Thursday. You only have 30 minutes, and you say to yourself, well, there's no way I can do 2,000 words today, so I'm going to skip today. And that's where it that's where your goals can actually derail you. So you feel like, all right, I can't get this accomplished in this amount of time, so I'm just going to just not do it. Now, with the idea of mini habits is you want to just ridiculously easy goals. And this is a term that was coined by my friend Stephen Geis in a book by the same name, so it's actually called mini habits. But his point was, if you're trying to build something into your day, don't necessarily create these really monumental goals. Just really kind of lowball it. And what lowballing is, it really depends on the individual person. Like, he'd suggest just have a goal of writing one sentence, and it really is such a mini habit like that. Like, walk 100 feet, something just ridiculously easy that there's no way you could possibly miss it. And then what you eventually do is you do build a habit. Now, obviously, if you write one sentence, you're going to say, all right, I started, and you just continue. Most 9 times out of 10, if you'll probably have a half hour to an hour, you'll just continue writing. And then there might be some days where you really just don't have time. You'll open up the document, you'll probably say to yourself, oh my God, this is stupid. But you'll write your sentence, but at least you can check it off and say, hey, I did it for the day. Now, my kind of mini air quote habit is to write 30 minutes every day. Now, that's actually might be hard for some people. I just know that no matter what, even on vacation, I can get up 30 minutes before my family does and just write for 30 minutes. But what generally happens is I'll write for an hour to an hour and a half and sometimes 2 hours. So It's almost like a way to get over that initial resistance. But I absolutely love mini habits. I use that with a lot of things in my life now. Just if I know I'm going to skip something, I'm like, all right, just agree to do it 5 minutes every day. And then once it happens for 5 minutes, I'll either just stop for the day or I'll continue, just add a little more.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I was just thinking of, it's similar when I teach piano too. And when I teach the kids piano lessons, ones that are just learning, I don't start with the full scale. I'll start with the 5-note scale. And it's just 5 notes. And then you're going up and you're coming down. And, which is super easy, right? But it gets them into that. I notice that when I start that way, it's easier for them within like a couple months, then they're ready to do the full scale, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that would be kind of like a mini habit, right?
Yeah, exactly. You do want to start as simple as possible, and I think people tend to beat themselves up if they're not, if they're not like their favorite self-published author, or they're not like Stephen King. They see what the pinnacle is, and they beat themselves up for not achieving that. But I think any writer that's done well, they understand the importance of habits and just doing it on a regular basis. And it's not necessarily about what you make, but just kind of putting in the time every single day.
In your book, in one of your books, you also talk about the importance of getting into creative flow for writers. Would you talk about what creative flow means? And then I think you wrote about a 3-step process that increases the likelihood of achieving peak performance consistently.
Sure. So there's a book called Flow. I'm not going to even try to pronounce the last name. It's a really long name. It's like Mikhail. I want to actually I have the book open right now. Let me see if I can do this on the fly and find the actual name. Okay, I can't. I don't want to bore the podcast listeners with me trying to go through the entire document. But the idea of flow, it's almost like you're in the zone, and just time passes without even knowing it. And I'm sure everyone out there has experienced it, whether you're exercising or you're working on something, that your head's down and you look up and it's 2 hours later and you have no idea where that time went. You were just so completely in sync with what you're doing. Now, flow state is amazing when it comes to writing, because simply you just get into the characters, or you get into what you're trying to explain to the readers if you're a nonfiction writer, and you're cranking out words, and you look up and it's an hour or two later. So my way of kind of finding flow is you can actually create it, and it can actually be built into your day like a habit. So my 3-step process is to work on fun writing projects. And obviously, if you're writing about something that you don't like at all, it makes it really tough to force yourself to write every single day. So if you're a fiction writer, obviously you want to write into a market that you find interesting. So if you love fantasy, then maybe you should be start writing fantasy books, or romance, write romance books, that sort of thing. Step 2 would be to create the perfect flow state environment, and that is removing all distractions. That does mean turning off every app on your phone. If you have one of those phones where there's always lots of push notifications, shutting down email, shutting down Facebook. There are some apps out there that will actually block certain websites. So if you're easily distracted, maybe you should look into getting those kind of website blockers. But the point here is you don't want to try multitasking. You want to just make sure you're absolutely 100% focused on writing. And the third step is to work in time blocks. And I do a modified version of what's called the Pomodoro technique, and that is 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And the benefit of that is you can get a lot of work done in that short compressed time, but you're not telling yourself, all right, I need to write for the next 2 hours. It's, all right, I need to just write for the next 25 minutes. And I would say, even if that's even a stretch for you, then break it down in 5 minutes on, 2 minutes off. The point is that you want to just work in sprints and give yourself a quick break. And when I mean break is get up out of your chair, walk around for 250 steps. And it's actually, I'm anal retentive enough where I have my Fitbit, and there's a little aspect of my Fitbit where it tells you to get up and walk for 250 steps. So I actually try to do that between writing blocks. So the point here is you want to just make sure that you're consistently focusing on your projects and you're building habits into making sure you can find your flow state.
And I can see why even starting with shorter time periods, right, of Pomodoro would really help. Because then you could always increase it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I find that 25 minutes works for me. With certain tasks, I actually do. I'm crazy enough where I track every second I spend on my business, every aspect of it. So you don't necessarily have to go as nutty as I am. But the point is, you kind of want to know where your time's being spent, and if you're actually writing or pretending to write, or if you're actually doing stuff to help your business, or you're goofing off on Facebook.
Yeah, true enough. Yes, that totally makes sense and would be very helpful. So you mentioned a little bit about this in your book, but you share a quote from Steve Jobs who said, "Real artists ship." And in your book, you share a 9-step process that you use to manage and finish your writing projects. Would you share briefly about those steps and why they would be helpful for writers?
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot in that one section, so I'll just give you the high touch points. But I guess the first step is to focus on one project at a time. And I kind of, I guess I did mention before that I work on 3 projects at a time, but I'm very deliberate about if I'm writing a book, I'm actually writing just that book and nothing else. So I guess the point of that first step is to make sure you're not tinkering with 2 or 3 books at the same time. You really want to just drill down and focus one at a time. The next one, the step 2, would be to work on your belief system, and that's kind of the affirmations and removing limiting beliefs, which we've already talked about. Step 3 would be to craft a customer avatar or a reader avatar. And this is kind of dovetailing on Chris Fox's right to market. So you want to know what this person likes to enjoy. So who is this person? What are their primary goals? What thoughts go on in their head? Obviously, if it's for nonfiction, you want to find out what motions do they regularly experience, what obstacles do they regularly encounter, what are their fears, what are the actual demographics, talking about background, interests, that sort of thing. So you really want to figure out exactly what type of content they enjoy. Step 4 would be to identify your log line, and that's basically like an elevator pitch. And the example I use in the book is from The Wizard of Oz, which is a lonely young small-town girl is swept away to a magical land by a tornado and embarks on a quest to see the wizard who can help return her home. And that is a one line about what the book is about. So the point is you want to just be able to sum up your book in 30 seconds or less, like you're on an elevator talking to a person who might be interested in reading it. And then the rest of the steps are like survey potential readers. And actually, this one program I'm using lately is really great for that. And I didn't realize how simple it was, but it's the Google Forms. Just Google Forms. And what you can do there is just ask people to respond to a survey, and you can, with Google, you can actually have it they'll turn out an Excel spreadsheet of all the responses. And I guess the point here is you want to find out exactly what your readers want. And I pretty much before every book I survey my readers and have them find out or ask them what they want to read. And kind of the rest of this is just getting into the actual writing process. So the rest of the steps are, you want to create an outline or beats. You want to write a crappy first draft. So you just want to get that first draft that's out there and don't really get stuck in your head trying to figure out exactly the right way to say it. Just put the words on paper. And then the rest is just finish the second draft, third draft, and then work with an editor and then publish your book.
That is really good, especially when you can, drill down to sort of steps like that. I found that actually very helpful because I don't know. I guess for me, I just need it step by step often, and when I can see it and read it, that that really it's like clears my mind a bit and helps me to get more into the zone of what I'm actually focused on. And so anyway, thanks for sharing that, because I think that'll help many writers that are listening, just to kind of, make the steps clearer for them.
Yeah, and actually, the one thing I would have added to that, because I'm starting to do this a lot more since I wrote the book, but it does make sense to break everything down into small chunks. So instead of just saying, all right, I have to go out and write a book in the next couple of months, which just sounds impossible, just try to create small steps. So what I actually do is I actually have like 70 steps written out in a small Excel spreadsheet, and I load this up to an app called Todoist. That's Todoist.
Okay.
And basically the idea there is I'll just go through this list, and all right, today I have to work on the title. Tomorrow I'll figure out the keyword. So it really is just break everything down into small little batches. So write for 30 minutes a day, maybe spend 10, 15 minutes working on your list of other things you need to get done, like finding a book cover or picking a title, doing keyword research, stuff like that.
I hadn't thought about that. Although just the word Excel spreadsheets kind of scares me, but
Well, it's just basically like, because there's rows. Just write down each step of the way in a separate row, and just what to do is they use what's called a CSV file, and you can turn an Excel spreadsheet into a CSV file, upload it to that app, and it'll just spit out this whole checklist of things you need to get done. And it's kind of it sounds technical, but it's like super easy to do, and you could do it on the free version of the app. And I just do it for the simple fact that every time I'm about to write a book, I have a kind of pre-filled step-by-step process that I just upload to the app in 1 minute. I have a checklist of everything I need to get done. So that's just kind of a way I built a process into my routine.
yeah, I could see that really making things simple, right? When you break things down to bite-sized steps, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why some people don't really follow through on their goals to complete multiple books. It's just they go through the process once and they tell themselves, "Oh, I can't do that again. That is so difficult." But if they kind of schedule stuff into their day where they know they have to work a little bit on their business every single day, it becomes a lot easier.
What would be your top piece of advice for writers who, have decided they really want to write and self-publish books and to build a writing business?
Okay, I would say for both nonfiction and fiction, they kind of had different strategies. So I would say for fiction, I do want to say that I've never written fiction before, but I have a lot of fiction writer friends who talk frequently about the process. But for fiction, just simply write to market. And if you're just trying to build a career, it would make sense to start off by just kind of writing stuff is going to sell. And I know Chris Fox has a great book about that, and he has a lot of great value to share. But the idea there is just find a market, write to that particular market, and just try to build up a series. And that's just the best way to kind of get going, is to get people interested in your first book, and they go on to buy the rest of the books in your series. Now, for nonfiction, I would say follow what I call the 3 Ps of nonfiction. So you want to make sure you have some passion. And the word passion, people tend to get a little bit scared of that, but you want to have some sort of personal interest in your particular topic. Like, I'm not sitting there thinking about habits every single day, but it is an important part of my life, so I feel like I have some level of passion for that particular topic. Now, the second P would be personal experience, and you do want to have a little bit of a background. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the foremost expert on the topic, but you should at least have some value that you can share. For instance, if you're just getting into, let's just say you just randomly started running and you've been a runner for a year, you haven't really tried your first marathon, but you know what it's like to go from being a non-runner into running your first K, then that would be maybe a good topic for your book. So the idea there is like you want to share what experience you do have with your readers. And finally, you wanted to make sure that the books are profitable. And I know there's a lot of great topics out in the world, but you want to make sure that this is something that people are buying. And that's just simply go to Amazon, type in a couple of topics related to your the genre or the niche that you're looking into, and to see what kind of rankings there are for that particular topic. And on every single book on Amazon, there's something called the Amazon bestsellers rank. It's right by the product details page. And the rule I like to look for, or the rule of thumb I like to see, is around 30,000 or less. And the number 30,000 means it's around 5 to 7 book copy sales a day. So if you see that, all right, these are books that are getting consistent sales, then it's probably a market that I could get into. And I would say that the reason you want to look for this is because just some things just flatly don't sell. You could write the best books in the world, but if no one is buying them, it's going to be very frustrating for you as an author to try to sell these books.
Those are excellent points. Yes, and just for people listening, you can find more of that information in. I mean, there's so much in all of your books, but a lot of this was from when I was reading through The Miracle Morning for Writers, and also how to write a nonfiction ebook in 21 days that readers love, and that sort of thing. But which I've really found helpful in my own writing process. So thank you for writing those books, Steve.
Oh, thanks. My pleasure.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing today. Would you tell readers and listeners what new books or projects you have on the go right now, and where can they find you and your books online?
Honestly, my life is like Groundhog Day. I kind of do the same thing over and over, which is primarily just write books. So probably the best place to find my books would be just go to Amazon. Actually, probably the easiest way to find it would be just go to habitbooks.com. And that just lists the latest books I have. That's actually a redirect page on my website, Develop Good Habits, where they could just find the latest books I'm releasing. And if you want to learn more about self-publishing, I haven't really published anything on the website for a while now, but it's still a lot of good kind of back catalog type of information. But if you want to go to authority.pub, there's a lot of good podcast episodes and really extensive blog posts about a little bit more of what we do on a daily basis with publishing books.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve. This has been so great to chat.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me on.